I think everybody's a little afraid of Terminator still, right? Like, it's fully autonomous. It walks around and makes its own decisions. It just does whatever it thinks, and then the end of the human race. I think that's like kind of like where we all quickly go with all this AI stuff. And the reality is that's probably going to be a slow process to get fully there, because you look at all the AI things and it's still just a bunch of promises. There's very few things out there that are actually like delivering on their promise yet of what AI can, really do.
I'm Sarah Nagel. I've spent my career leading research and product development within some of the world's largest brands.
And I'm Chad Reynolds. I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Verve.
And this is AI Powered by People.
Each episode will dive into the latest AI developments and talk to an industry leader to help you better understand and utilize AI.
We'll take you inside some of the world's most famous companies and share examples of how AI is improving innovation, consumer engagement, media, and marketing.
No matter what industry you work in, we'll help you navigate one of the biggest disruptions to organizations and people today.
Hey, Chad, how's it going? How have you been?
I've been good, and my agent is good too. You created your own agent net?
Well, there was one that was kind of created for me.
In the spirit of collaboration.
In the spirit of collaboration, yeah. We're playing around with, some aspects of Verve, and because you and I have been recorded we have many, many hours of our voice and our likeness that we've been playing around with what, an AI may look like, sound like, and we've been playing around with that, on our Verve platform, and I've been asking, I can't even say like myself, I've been asking the
What do you say?
other
Asking
Sarah.
the agent?
Yeah, I don't even, the agent.
Alt Sarah?
Yeah, alt Sarah.
That takes you back to the 90s and
Yeah,
you're hanging
she's
out.
like, wears ripped jeans. Like,
Just hanging out at Claire's and Hot Topic. Yeah.
Oh man, lots of eyeliner.
Yeah.
So the alt version of me. Yeah, I've been just, I get it to read poems all the time, which I just think is funny. And also a fun way that I've played with it with my kiddo is he wrote stories with me. So like, I'm like, okay, what do you want the story to be about? And he's like, Batman and the Joker and a picnic and surfing and like all these things. And so I put all those things in, and then it read back a story in my voice, which is just pretty incredible. So and there's more to come there, but it's just really fun experiment that we've been playing with.
So for those listening along, June 3rd, we'll be launching V-Team out of private preview and into the public, rolling it out for all customers over the next couple of weeks in like beta mode. But yeah, you can create your own agents and create an alternative version of yourself. Right, Sarah?
Yeah. I can't wait to see what people will do and what they'll create. Because I think, we have a perspective on like what we want to do, what we want to make, how we want to create with them. But it'll be really cool to see how people outside of Verve, maybe folks that are not designers, folks that see how they'll play with it and what they'll do.
So Sarah, what will you do with your alternative Sarah, or just agents in general?
With agents in general, we can do so many things with them. And you can ask, with Verve, which is really cool and kind of exclusive to us, is you can have conversations with the research that you do. So when we talk to, we run campaigns and we talk to different people, say like on, skincare or something. When that skincare research report is, done and closed, you can have a conversation with it. So generally as researchers, you have to go through all that information, you have to summarize, you have to do all this stuff, and you have to create these reports and send them out to teams. But instead of doing that, what you're able to do now is just talk to it, like kind of talk to the research report as if it's like an entity. It's the best way I can describe it. Can ask different questions, questions that weren't necessarily asked in the research, to elicit new ideas, new opportunities. And then from there, there's, you can create images based on the opportunities. You can create, sketches, or you can create like photorealistic sketches of it. You can create plans for social media. You can create, rather than just going right to the image, you can also create an idea, like kind of all the aspects of an idea, the different types of materials you'd want to use and kind of what you'd want it to look like. So there are, I mean, that's just scratching the surface. I mean, those are the agents that we've created, based on some of the clients that we have, but there you can do so much: UX design, product design, social media, the list goes on
Yeah.
and on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we used to create design targets,
Mm-hmm.
like an aspirational consumer persona
Mm-hmm.
that was essentially a PowerPoint slide,
Yep.
description, some images, kind of communicate who they are. But now you can actually build an agent of that person
Mm-hmm.
so that your whole team can talk with them about their life, interests,
Yeah.
test concepts with them before you even share it with the public, all
Mm-hmm.
different kinds of things. So I really think this is going to be, I mean, this will definitely be the biggest thing we've ever launched. And I think to echo your thoughts, I mean, we're really excited about what people are going to be able to do with this and create with it. So we'll share more as we launch to the public in the next couple of weeks.
More to come there. Coming up, we're going to be sharing an interview with Ryan Devenish, who is the head of design for a company called Alloy. AI. It's a company that uses AI to map out the supply chain for consumer good companies so they can understand kind of once these products hit Walmart or Target, what's happening with the products. So, more to come there. All right, now let's talk about what's in the headlines. So, speaking of agents, at Google I/O 2024, Google had a ton of announcements with Gemini updates and search upgrades and lots of things. But they also announced Gems, which are their version of agents. What do you think about, and kind of like how would you compare their agents to ours?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be focused on developers, so a developer can go in and create an agent. I think obviously what we're launching in a couple weeks versus Google is kind of TBD, when they're going to launch these out to the public.
Mm-hmm.
But they're essentially like builder grade, so only accessible to engineers and developers, whereas ours are really focused on we want everybody to be able to use them
Mm-hmm.
to do all different kinds of use cases. This is kind of the year of agents, in my opinion, and what businesses are going to be able to do with them to take over some of the different tasks, but also some of those use cases you just mentioned, where kind of the larger tech companies aren't necessarily focused on solving these problems for your everyday business user.
And kind of just everyday human too. I think that there's,
Yeah.
there's tasks outside of just kind of outside of business that will just be so exciting to see, what will be created there. So cool. It seemed like there was a lot of buzz around gems, which is cool. But yeah, like you said, TBD. We'll see when when they'll
Yeah.
show up.
Yeah. And then Google also announced VO, their text to video generator.
Mm-hmm.
And then we covered Sora and OpenAI previously, but I think,
Yeah, I haven't played
like,
with this one. I haven't kind of seen as much about this. Have you seen any videos or
no, I mean,
no?
it's still in private preview, but
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously clearly going after Sora and then also Runway, which I think has built quite a following on their platform too.
Related, OpenAI has announced ChatGPT 4.0, and again, I think we kind of have the same feeling about this as we do around the Google stuff. It's really cool, but I think it's interesting to see that they have it out there, but it's expected. It's expected next step. Any other thoughts there about GPT 4.0?
No, I mean, I think we're just going to continue to see these releases, over the next few quarters of just consistently kind of upping the ante of more compute, more power, more capability. And, like in related news, OpenAI also struck a deal to finally bring Reddit content to ChatGPT, which I think is, it is an interesting one.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, just that they're making it more kind of it's open, that they're actually like using that information to train and being, I'd say a little bit more honest about it, which I think is great. And I think that there will be more deals like this to be able to access data because it needs, you need to be able to pay to play in a lot of these cases.
Yeah, I mean, it's we covered this before on kind of changing the end user agreement or terms and conditions when you're using a platform. It's
Mm-hmm.
fairly easy for companies to do this and kind of change the rules of the game, where now they're monetizing all their content when you went in and you thought it was a forum to
Mm-hmm.
kind of share different things. So kind of interesting how that's all unfolding for people, and just curious how the general public feels about that.
Chad, this feels like a race. What are they racing towards?
Artificial general intelligence, AGI.
What is that for our audience?
I mean, it's a more, I think, holistic approach to AI and generative AI, where it can do thinking and planning on its own.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
So right now, it's kind of up to us to prompt. But what if we weren't there to prompt it? Can it run essentially on its own and be more autonomous rather than just kind of scheduling? It's just a kind of the next level of that, and it essentially doesn't sleep. So you can attach it to lots of different and also difficult problems to solve, but also give it everyday tasks. So it's doing things for you.
So are we talking like Her, the movie Her?
More, yeah. But yes, yeah.
Okay. Well, that will get really interesting when you think about virtual companionship and relationships and, kind of going the step beyond just kind of scheduling and helping to build and create.
Yeah, I mean, right now, everything, like AI is predominantly stuck inside of devices. So it's kind of understood through that, kind of the inputs and outputs. But when you think of every surface, every building, every location, every interaction you might have, that was kind of the promise of the Internet of Things, but there wasn't really compute attached to that. And so I think with this, it's opening up, all different kinds of scenarios where you're trying to pull in inputs from kind of multimodal sensors all over the world. And then can those actually react on their own to generate an action without you necessarily being there. So lots of really interesting use cases, but people are debating how close are we actually to this? Are we decades away? Are we years away? But I think that's where a lot of the bigger tech companies are trying to go towards.
All right. And then last up is a little bit different, but it's coming from kind of the entertainment world. But Sony has sent 700 letters to different tech companies, so including Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, to warn them not to use its music to train its AI models without permission. Sony represents Beyonce, Adele, and many, many other artists. They're forbidding anyone to use this data to train and develop or make money off of this data. And it said it has a reason to believe that the tech companies may have already made unauthorized uses of the music. And we've been talking about this for quite a while around kind of music and likeness, and you know how I feel about making sure that the artists are compensated.
Yeah. So this has felt like a paper trail, just like putting a piece of paper out just to create make it very clear, in case they haven't already, in the press, what is in and out of bounds.
700 companies too. Like, who are they talking to beyond kind of the big guys? But what changes do you think, or do you think there will be changes post this?
I mean, it's just teeing up conversations around monetization. How do you compensate people when you're using their content? I mean, I think we wouldn't be surprised if it came out that they've already used that as training data. They've done it for text-based content on all different sites too. So I'm sure we'll get there, similar to Spotify coming up with a model to reward musicians, around that. But it's gonna take a little bit of time. But clearly, OpenAI has done this, already with Reddit and others, just to monetize any of the content behind their paywalls. I think this is going to be interesting where this takes shape. Is it going to be through more of these AI companies, or is it going to be more through Spotify?
All right. Well, let's get to our interview with Ryan Devenish. He's the head of design for alloy.ai, and he'll give us insight into how the company uses AI to map the supply chain for consumer goods brands. He focuses on the user experience design so we can make that really complex data understandable and actionable for the inventory teams and the sales teams. So it should be a good interview. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Hey, Ryan, how are you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how you doing? I'm doing well.
Good. I am the only person on the call that did not go to the University of Cincinnati.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
You're a dapper?
I'm a dapper.
I
Yes.
What's a
didn't know that.
dapper?
Well, we went to DAP, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yes.
DAAP, Design, Art, Architecture, and Planning.
You
So
okay.
got it.
which letter were you in?
Well, I started in architecture actually. So I thought I was going to be an architect and I was actually top of my class and then I was just like this isn't for me and I got overwhelmed by honestly thinking about building a building that would then be there for 100 years and
Yeah,
then I would have to see all my mistakes perpetually forever, you know? So yeah, I started to get really into digital stuff and digital design was relatively new at DAP at the time, but it was
yeah,
under the D, under the design
yeah.
category
No,
there, yeah.
I think you guys are talking
oh,
about some sort of handshake or something.
no, no,
There's a handshake.
there is. Yeah, well, it's such a small graduating class. I mean, you've got like these different programs. When I went there, I don't know what was 95 to 2000.
Yep.
And my first year is when they, I guess in 96, they started digital design. And,
Yeah. Okay.
and I was in graphic and they're like, oh, we're starting up this new thing around like online, like digital stuff. Do you want to move over there? And I'm like, I don't know if I want to be the guinea pig for this like whole new program,
Totally.
um, but it worked. It worked out well.
Yeah, that's actually how my parents felt too when I switched over because my mom's actually she ran her own interior design company for like
Yeah.
commercial interiors for a long time and they all like I think they both my parents envisioned that I was going to be an architect and take over their company and like do all this stuff. And then I was like, "Hey, mom and dad, I'm doing this thing called the internet." And they were like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
eventually they
Different kind of
swallowed it.
buildings. Yeah. Different
Yeah,
kind of
totally.
building. No, it's
Awesome.
awesome.
So currently you're the head of design for a company called Alloy AI. Can you tell us a little bit about your role and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm head of design, which is a silly way to put that I'm actually the only designer at this company. We've had designers here and there over the years, but for various reasons, things always haven't worked out to grow the team significantly. But yeah, so I focus primarily on product. You know, my title allows me to sort of do what I want to some degree. So if I really cared about investing more in the brand and stuff, then I would spend more time there. But I'm really focused on the product, helping our customers and achieve what they're trying to achieve with our product. And at the end of the day, we're producing a tool for them. So that's ultimately just trying to be as useful as possible.
Ryan, can you dig into Alloy? So
Yeah.
what a little bit more about the company? What does it do? What problems is it trying to solve?
Yeah, so in the nutshell, we're basically trying to map the supply chain. Um, there's a ton of inefficiency in our supply chains. It's a big black box in a number of cases. And then for our customers who are finished goods, we work with a lot of different brands. When it has a box around it and a UPC label, that's kind of where Alloy starts tracking things. And what we're able to do is sort of track the progress of a product all the way from manufacturing on through it getting sold at point of sale. And that's really kind of the bread and butter and sort of like where we hang our hat considerably is on the point of sale end of the spectrum. We integrate with hundreds of retailers, e-commerce solutions, et cetera. And today, that's like a fire hose of information that comes back. So if you sell a product at Target, you get access to their portal, which is full of all sorts of information about inventory and sales. And then basically, we can take all that information and harmonize it across all of your retailers. So if you imagine you're selling at Walmart, Target, Amazon, et cetera, all of those different retailers sell and share information differently. So, one, just as a really simple example, Target might present information in days, and Amazon might present information in weeks. And someone has to somehow translate that and make it all harmonized so that at the end of the day, you can look at this one product and go, how does this sell across everything? That's sort of something you can't really do without a tool like ours today.
Yeah. And what type of clients or customers are typically on Alloy?
It's really anybody who's got like a box and a label on it for the most part. We've historically done really, really well with surprisingly like toys and puzzles, a couple interesting brands there. And then we've had longtime customers with like Bose, the electronics company, and Valvoline of another interesting label out there.
Got it.
Can I ask how long have you guys been around?
I believe the company was started mid 2016, so it's been around for some number of years now. The company's never gotten over its skis in terms of trying to like really invest a ton of money in the company or anything. We're a Series A company. We've sort of worked with that initial capital, and we're sort of at a cash flow neutral place these days, where we get to pick a little bit about how we invest our time and where we want to go next. So as a startup, we're like surprisingly mature, and still somehow
Yeah.
call ourselves a startup.
When everything was starting to launch around AI, just different AI tools that were coming out over the
Yeah.
last couple of years, as a previous entrepreneur in a SaaS company, I can't even imagine what these types of tools could do to a business. So just curious if you could walk us through maybe the last year
Yeah.
and a half or 2 years and what some of those conversations were.
Interestingly, so AI's kind of taken like an interesting journey over the years. It's really popped in the last, year and a half or so. But that's like a very specific flavor of AI. So that'd be like your generative AI
Hmm.
models that people are becoming more and more adept of. Um, Alloy has really been primarily focused, and I guess probably the majority of my career for that matter, even outside of Alloy, is more around algorithms and applying big data models and machine learning. Those are probably like the early AI
Hmm.
that's people don't know as much about, maybe, or at least the general public wouldn't be as familiar with. So hundreds of retailers. I think it's somewhere around 800 different connections that we have at this point. Um, if they're all speaking different languages, we need to somehow be able to take all of that information and harmonize it. We build algorithms and other methodologies of sort of reading all that information and being confident in what we believe it to be, and then somehow putting it all together in a big package for our customers. That is, I said only a handful of words there, but there's like a pretty giant task taking place there to
Right.
accomplish all of that. We often then on top of that would build something like a forecast. So that's kind of what our customers would probably be most used to doing with a
Hmm.
lot of this type of data is they're trying to get a sense of like, well, we sell candy bars, at the store, and we're introducing this new type of candy bar, and we think it'll do what? How is it going to sell? And they would then like sort of look at our data set possibly and go, okay, well, this is how candy bars traditionally sell. They go like this, and they have this signature and that sort of thing. And so we can sort of apply that learning, that machine learning, then to generate a
Got it.
forecast. And yeah, it's going to give you a sense of what might be, if you
Yeah.
will.
And for like the customer view, so if I owned a candy bar company,
Yeah.
which I aspire to someday, but if I do, if I do, I don't know.
Everybody does.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who
Mr.
knows? Willy
Wonka here.
Wonka. Yeah, just go crazy. So, well, let's say I'm a candy bar manufacturer. I'd log into Alloy, see my sales across different retailers. Can I see like just chocolate bar growth within like across all customers, or is it primarily just my own view into the world?
That's starting to happen more and more, but there's like some interesting we talk about that internally. That's something that, especially companies where they become a platform and that's their play. When you have this platform play, it's really about the data. So like once we have all the data that from everybody, now you can start
Right.
to apply these like learnings on top of it, which I think is kind of what you're alluding to.
Yeah.
Um, and you can start to say like, oh, and here's how candy sells overall, and your slice of it is chocolate, and therefore like here's how you can expect the world to operate. We don't do a lot of that today, and actually there's a lot that doesn't really happen at all in this industry for the most part. It's just now starting to happen. We're seeing it with Walmart has produced a product called Luminate, which
Hmm.
is a platform that, I don't know, it just provides you a richer data set, we'll say.
Yeah.
I'm not super familiar with it quite yet, but one piece of it is they start to give you categorical data of all your competitors and that sort of thing too.
Yeah.
So there's something happening in the industry there, and I think we have an opportunity too, but we haven't really. It's more about like your data set and how you sell.
Got it. And
Yeah.
can I ask, so how did you get started with all these different retailers, just getting access to their
Yeah.
data streams? Because yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was quite an undertaking.
Yeah, I wasn't around for all of it, so I can't say for sure. I know that there's a joke in there that I actually brought up the other day, and I was joking, but apparently someone said it was a real idea at one point, which is like we should just start a small company and make it really successful at Walmart, and then we would have all the inner workings of how this all goes, and we would know. Um, but my understanding is to gain like just insight into how all this works a little bit. Our CEO, I believe his sister actually works not quite in the exact same space that we work in, but has some relationship there and understands this world. I believe she's a VP of sales somewhere. And so was able to sort of provide some insight into this. And then over time, I think really, it's not like we have some special deal with Target or Walmart or something. For the most part, it's really us taking your credentials because your brand does have that deal with Walmart because you sell at Walmart. And then we sort of scrape the system, if you will. So we borrow your credentials, we go in, we pull down your data, however it comes down. In some cases, that's like a robotic process, like I described, where we just log in. In other cases, you just give us a file, or the
Got it.
file gets like forwarded us to somehow.
Okay, cool.
So within these organizations, like who's the primary user or team, and kind of what does that look like from their side?
Yeah. So sales leaders are kind of our focus for the most part. If you really think about like kind of the conversation that's happening between the retailer and the brand, it's this person that's like hopping on the phone with Walmart and they're going, "Hey, sales are looking great. That promotion we're running is like really taking off. I think we need to get some more inventory there by next week. Here's how we're going to do it." That's like a common conversation that's happening between these two parties. We're there to help inform them. So we're there to give them like almost, not quite, but almost real-time data about, hey, here's how sales literally happened yesterday and what's going to happen next. And here's some recommendations about how to like approach that.
I'm curious about like kind of the interface, and how do you as a design lead think about, it being a user-friendly interaction, taking all
Sure.
this complex data and making it really understandable to this salesperson or other folks that are
Yeah.
using it?
So sales leaders, revenue folks are kind of like where we are really putting our emphasis and our focus. There's an ecosystem of people though, and an ecosystem of products that we have to fit within though. So that also means that we have to play nice with the IT folks and the people who have all the passwords, and they have sort of a view into the product and a way to control things and administer. The other teams that we have worked with closely are also like inventory. So the people who are actually like at some point in time, there's a physical product that is moving from one place to another and eventually ends up on a shelf for you to then purchase. Somehow, someone somewhere is like managing a warehouse full of inventory, and they have to understand all those levels and how inventory moves through the system. And then sort of the last party that we put any real focus on has been like this planning group, which is where the forecasts really play in. So they're really thinking about overall for the whole year, like both inventory, supply, and demand. How is that all going to match up, and how are we going to try to like make it as close as possible, sort of anticipating demand spikes and things like that, and getting ahead of them. So that's kind of who's using it.
Yeah.
But really, our focus is the sales folks. In terms of interface, Alloy's traditionally been it's a bunch of dashboards for the most part. When I started at the company, it was a lot of individual dashboards. Even the navigation, like customer to customer, was actually like very bespoke. So my process has been a lot of standardizing and bringing probably what a lot of us actually are used to, or even like have used before for that matter, because it's not uncommon patterns that I'm applying. And trying to bring like a level of user friendliness to these applications. I mentioned earlier, it's a tool. It's a professional tool for these people to do their job, but they all use iPhones all day and stuff too. So we're trying to like sort of meet them where they are and what they're used to. And we're also trying to sort of build out to meet more parties within the company. So there might be one or two people that are like are pro users and they love us, and like what they get out of the tool is like perfect. That's what they are asking for and why they bought us. But if we want more people to sort of have access to that information without sort of having this one point of contact at the company, it needs to be applicable and understandable to them. And just like throwing a dashboard at you isn't the answer, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So this is actually where, to like round out AI a little bit, this is where the generative stuff is actually starting to get interesting. So we've started to apply LLM models, which primarily is like pushing information to ChatGPT and like getting it back, um, for the purpose of sort of explaining what you're looking at a little bit in actual text. So if I'm looking at a chart and the number, the line goes up to the right,
Mhm.
what should I actually know about that? Historically, it's been like we title the chart, we put some information on there, but you have to sort of hunt it out and
Hmm.
scroll and scrub it a little bit to figure it out yourself. Um, More and more, I'm trying to just tell you what it's saying,
Hmm.
Yeah.
and then go from there.
Just so, because I know a
Yeah.
bit about your past, because we used to work together at Smart
Yep.
Design, and after Smart, you worked at a place called O-Power. And when I'm thinking about you designing these dashboards, I'm thinking about the experience you had working at O-Power, where you're taking all of this energy use of people,
Yeah.
and making it really understandable. So it was kind of an overlay on top of kind of their energy bill, to make it really understandable. Are there any sort of like, anything that you've learned from that experience at O-Power that's kind of informing some of the stuff that you are working on now?
Yeah. 100%. One of the design principles that we had at OPower that's probably my favorite of all time, and I'll never forget it, is to just assume that no one cares. This is a little different because it's energy, and that's because like you're receiving your energy bill, and if you're a renter and stuff, in some cases you're not even paying for that. So there's like a very different world here, but just assuming that like when people enter in and start looking at your product or whatever the thing is that you're putting in front of them, they're not going to read it all. They're going to scan it quickly and like kind of move on with their life. And so giving them an opportunity or like interrupting that a little bit to try to get your message across is probably the biggest takeaway probably that I
Hmm.
gained from OPower. That and like leveraging little behavioral mechanics to try to encourage people to take some action, whatever that action is.
Curious though, on the UX around this. So Sarah and I talked about, well, especially because you're visualizing data.
Yeah,
I think dashboards were the preferred maybe mechanic or mechanism to look at and see if
yeah.
there was a problem or like which way is it going up or down, and then try to dig in from there. But now with AI embracing a lot of more agentic user experiences, just curious how you're parsing through some of those behaviors and trends around user experience, and how might that show up in the product a little bit differently.
Historically, it's been like short statements that try to get something across, and there tends to be this problem that we get into almost always, where it's a manufactured statement that we try to pump data into somehow. So um, some piece of information, blank, where data is going to go. Some piece of information with another blank where data is going to go, and then the data pumps in, and it almost reads like a sentence. That's sort of been the historical way that we might title something mechanically or
Mm-hmm.
digitally, I guess. With LLMs, there's this opportunity now for that to like be a legitimate sentence, or even in the way like a conversation takes place where you can emphasize a particular piece of it of what you're trying to say. Um, I think that's where the change is happening for us. So it's no longer this like sentence structure that I've pre-written out and the data just goes in the blanks anymore. It's like I can sort of put that whole piece of information in front of the system and allow it to like rewrite it for me in a format that is understandable and yet at the same time still concise and still able to like kind of keep it in, in the space that I want to keep it in or something.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a big piece of it. Another area, I think a lot of people, especially with the generative models, a lot of it's like chatting with the the system. And for better or for worse, that's not going to be where we go for some period. We actually built a chat bot to sort of integrate that stuff, but I don't see it personally, and maybe I'm a pessimist. I just don't see it like being the way that you really want to traverse this information, although it's an interesting exploration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you see it?
I don't know. That's a good question. I have no idea. So far, I mean, I think conversation there's something there. I actually do spend time occasionally like asking ChatGPT verbally instead of writing it out. And it does a decent job, vastly better than like Siri and stuff, which is almost like a letdown now. There's probably a case where that is gonna take off and like actually be pretty important, because I think at some point in time, these interfaces, they're not going to be, they don't seem like they're going to stay on the screen quite as long
Right.
anymore. They feel like they're coming off the screen more and more and like into our environments in different ways. Um, and so the way that we interact with them probably just isn't going to be the same. And it seems like if this voice thing, it's flopped so many times before, but if we can like really get it this time, it could be pretty sweet.
I'm just like, as you're talking about it, just the things that pop to my mind are,
Yeah.
creating almost like agents per retailer. Like if
Mm.
I have that chocolate bar company, having like a target supply chain manager agent who's like looking
Yeah.
after, this account, looking after like my Walmart sales, looking after this, but also kind of functioning as like my assistant to tell me where I need to go next, and
Mm.
maybe bringing back. I'm just curious on like that as you're working through that.
Yeah.
Um, just what kinds of things do you think people want to explore?
I mean, I think even in our brand, like we've personified some element of this to say, or some element of our brand to say that like we're gonna be the sage. We know all these things,
Mm-hmm.
and we can sort of guide you on your journey. And I think that's what you're talking about a little bit
Yeah.
there in this.
Yeah.
And I like your terminology of like the agent, or like this person sort of looking after my target supply chain, which is like an interesting way to
Yeah.
think about it. Just like I would call up somebody, in that department and be like, hey, we got something going on at Target. Let's figure that out. To some degree, that's an interesting way to like certainly look at that. I think there's a place for it. And I think people do actually want, whether it actually is an agent or an actual assistant is like one thing, we'll see. But I think people do want that feeling. And that is our job, I guess, as designers, is to like instill feelings a lot. So they want to feel like they're taken care of and like the agent's got my back, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Curious about your perspective on kind of how will this evolve roles in your perspective, within organizations. So if you have these
Mm.
agents that are able to do so much, and I know it's kind of the top of mind for a lot of people. So like what happens to the human, and kind of where do you see the humans interacting with these either agents or kind of overall AI systems?
For a long time, I've been pretty adamant that there's a human in the system no matter what. So I think, as Alloy is trying to map this supply chain, which today, sort of starts with manufacturing, but we could go all the way down to like the raw materials. How many grains of sand do I need to produce this glass to produce whatever product I'm making? It seems like even if we get it all right, you still want someone in there to say, yes, go. That's okay. I'm all right with that. Because there's a bit of it's Terminator a little bit. I think everybody's a little afraid of Terminator still, right? Like it's fully autonomous. It walks around and makes its own decisions. It just does whatever it thinks, and then the end of the human race. I think that's like kind of like where we all quickly go with all this AI stuff. And the reality is that's probably going to be a slow process to get fully there. Because you look at all the AI things and it's still just a bunch of promises. There's very few things out there that are actually like delivering on their promise yet of what AI can, really do. So
What's
I like to
delivering on its
temper,
promise in your
yeah.
perspective?
Well, I mean, like, so you were sort of asking, like, how does this impact jobs? I think some people are like, oh my gosh, I'm a designer. My job's gone. Figma can do it all now, just like, but someone still has to like kind of shape the mold and like tell the system where to begin and where to end. Even like, I don't know, we can talk about art. Art's like, there's no goal necessarily with art. It's like whatever the artist decides a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Can computers generate art? It's sort of like an AI question to some degree, right? But like, when does the computer know when to stop? When does it decide art is complete and this will like give the people the feeling that I intended to give them? And I don't know that AI ever can. So I still feel adamant that no matter how advanced AI gets, we're probably still a big piece of the picture, at least for some period of time, until
Mm.
Terminator does indeed take over.
So at Verve, we're kind of at the front end of innovation where we're
Yeah.
creating, we're doing research that's it's going to turn into ideas and concepts. We iterate with consumers, and then there's the product is created. And then there's, what you guys are doing is kind of more in the supply chain system there. Do you ever see kind of like or have you guys talked about like what's next? Are you going to think about like potentially connecting those pieces in any sort of way, or, thinking about expanding what Alloy is able to do?
Yeah. We talk a lot about what can we do that's outside the Alloy system now? And that's probably where the AI stuff comes into play a little bit more because there's just so much other connections that you need to make and like context that you then need to like understand. So that's probably where a lot of these systems start to get really powerful with AI. But yeah, we're focused on like how do you execute? At the end of the day, like I can show you you should go buy more and you should do this at Target, but until you actually pick up the phone or write an email to your buyer at Target, nothing's going to happen.
Would you want your
Yeah.
AI to do that for you though?
I don't know. To some degree, like that's what I mean earlier about like I still feel like the human still has to be in the system somehow because I don't want there's a sense of control over all these other contexts that this one system doesn't yet have. And so like my bank account, for example, if this system says buy 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 and my bank account says you don't have any money, like well, too bad. Like it doesn't work. But like how can I provide that
Yeah.
sort of context? That might be an interesting like opportunity in the future where these systems start to cross over and connect a little bit. Um, do I want that? Within reason. I think like I'm uneasy with giving the reins over completely at this point. I think I still want to be able to like confirm, yes, I agree with your assessment. I think that's where I want to be right now with AI.
What platforms are you playing around with right now? Like, what's out there that's interesting to you? What have you played with that you think is doing a really good job and kind of leading the space? We'll say like
Hmm.
maybe more in the generative space.
Hmm. I've I haven't played around with a ton. I'll be honest with that first. I do spend quite a bit of time with ChatGPT, almost exclusively throwing either a bunch of complex questions at it. So here's like all the information about a conversation I just had. Tell me like how to think about that conversation. Like what notes should I pull out of that maybe differently? So that's like one way that I leverage it. Um, I leverage it a lot to get me started when I just want something written. Personally, I don't think writing's like my strongest suit. So in some ways, like giving it a couple keywords to go with, and then like spit me back this email or something. Not that I write emails to people with AI, but more for my own work to like sort of produce a screen that looks like an email is written or something. So there's a lot of sort of me like looking for you to generate something back, and then I borrow that. Um, the other stuff that I've seen that's really interesting though is like building out systems. So I was looking at one product and I do not remember the name of it, unfortunately, but it you basically told it what you wanted to produce, like the product you wanted to make, and it started to build like a back end system with databases and connecting all those dots for you. Um, it definitely fell short at some point in time, which is kind of what I was referring to earlier about missing the mark. It just doesn't. At some point in time, like you still need to know what you're doing. I'm finding it doesn't quite like put a bow on it and just wrap it all up for you. So, and then really lately, I've been playing more and more with like the art generation stuff. So throw some random words at it and see what pops out. It's an interesting way just to like get an idea going and then see what pops out. Surprising how some of it is like close to almost you could just print this, like throw it on a t-shirt and just like go, which makes me start thinking like I need to drop ship, start a drop shipping business or something. We'll see.
So Ryan, what are just as you made that jump from architect to UX or to digital, um, where do you see the next, I guess, space emerging for you? Like, it just feels like a lot of different things are shifting. I'm just curious if you see the role of UX design even just as AI becomes much more integrated into UX, and how do you see that shifting maybe the industry, but also you and your profession?
Hmm. For me, like I was saying earlier, it's really been a great starting point. So it's like as the designer of one at this company, it's been really good as like almost a sounding board where I need someone to like give me some fresh ideas that I otherwise would just be a little stagnant on or something. So that's been really awesome. And I think that's a huge opportunity in the space. It seems like there's some products out there that are starting to just like do simple things like that. Give me a e-commerce page and it just like sort of generates it. I'm concerned that that's going to produce like a lot of sameness. I'm curious how that'll maybe evolve or something. And that's again where I think like humans are going to probably play a role in sort of creating the boundaries and the constraints that these things need to operate within. Because that's probably like where we really need to start moving as designers more maybe is thinking about, okay, this is now a tool, it does what it does, and now that I understand my tool a little bit, here's like the slight tweaks that I'm going to do to get it to produce the type of stuff that I want. And that's definitely a challenge today. Like when I mentioned the image generation stuff, it's definitely a challenge like to get something in my head which I otherwise probably couldn't do, by my own skills and produce like the thing that's in my head exactly. And AI can get close, but it's still, I need to still keep like massaging it. Not quite like that, a little more like this, and until it like produces exactly what I'm looking for. There is definitely a real possibility that there's a lot of like we'll call low level, entry level workers or something that this sort of kills jobs for. Every technology does that though. Every single technology does that. It's always been the case, especially with computers. And then slowly but surely, the mass moves to the new layer, which is like they're more of a knowledge worker, and that's probably where we all go. We start working on those constraints more, as opposed to drawing physical boxes on the page, that sort of thing.
I mean, those are great questions. I mean, I think like with design, it always started with questions.
Totally.
Like spotting something, seeing a problem, and then I mean, great researchers are great at framing questions, but just being constantly curious. And that's just kind of interesting how like that parallel with also like agentic interfaces are always about just questioning the data. Like the data is always there.
Right.
It's just in kind of I would say like the dashboard world, but just like when the data is all out there, it's saying one thing, but what are the questions you're asking? You're asking like, what do you really, really want to know? Um, I think I don't know. I
Yeah.
just see there being a totally different way to interact with data.
That was one of the things when we did attempt to integrate some chatbot mentality
Yeah,
into Alloy. One of the things I early on felt we weren't doing right was like you would ask it a question and it would just give you the answer. So, how are my sales? 42. Like great. Like
is it
that's
good? Is it
not
bad?
a,
And like,
yeah,
how do I
well,
make it better? Like,
and maybe I know that 42 is good or bad. Maybe that's all the context I really need, but
yeah,
that's not like how good conversations take place, right? Like
right,
it's multi-threaded. There's other things going on. It's like, yeah, 42, but also did you know like this other thing? Like, did you know the impact of that 42 on this other thing was like
right.
the other piece of information you should know? And that should maybe lead to your next question. Um, and I think that's it's an interesting way that some of these models can start to produce yeah, like real useful like sounding boards for people to your point to like sort of ask the next question, maybe the
Yeah,
one they didn't even know they needed to ask.
yeah. I mean, just kind of thinking forward of is it introducing a whole idea around like human experience or HX as like a new way to design. Because I
Mm,
think I mean, even just if you walked up to someone like, "Hey, how you doing?" Sarah's like, "Good." I'm like, go on.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
what like
totally.
just give me a lead in into something else, right? So I think with anything that you're designing, it can't just be a question and answer. It has
Right.
to also like take me somewhere new as a user.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So Ryan, what do for all the entrepreneurs out there who are building SaaS companies, and for our listeners, a SaaS company is like a software subscription based business. Um, What were some of the lessons learned as you tried to experiment with different ways to apply AI, knowing that you were
Mm,
coming more from like a traditional kind of machine learning side, but the generative,
yeah.
could pose different experiences. Just curious how, like, what were some of the lessons learned, and maybe you're already continuing to learn them.
I think a big one is it was interesting watching the hype train. Well, that's maybe like it's something we still actually question. I literally had this conversation with my CEO last week of like, do we lean into this a little more still? Is it something that we even talk about in our sales discussions? Because we do sort of bring it up and show them, hey, we have this chatbot and we've done some interesting things with it.
What has the reception been?
It's a lot of head nodding and kind of like cool because it's a problem that no one's asking for. And uh, that's specifically the chatbot that we implemented, which is like, um, how are my sales? And it will produce a dashboard and like give you a little bit of a synopsis of what it sees in the dashboard. People are like, that's cool in the sense of I can see where this goes, but they have to have that visionary eye. It's not like knocking them over the head quite yet, I guess is where I was at with it yet. So it's not, the product doesn't mature yet. But I guess that's what I was really going into around hype. So it's like, there's a big hype. We got a couple big players in the space that are making some interesting moves, ChatGPT being the primary one there. Um, all of a sudden all these like copycat products pop up and like little guys that are trying to do something and make themselves known, but all of them are a lot of promises and very little value delivery, I think, in my opinion, at least upfront, which is understandable because it's all brand new. But one of the things that I think that we learned and are still learning again is like, well, we probably could have let that one mature a little bit before we decided to lean into it. We didn't really need to spin up like a small innovation team that was focused on that, probably. Um, that's not saying that anybody shouldn't do that, but you have to pick and choose those because you don't have an infinite supply of resources. So yeah, I don't know if that's even a lesson yet. I guess that's still something we're figuring out, really, is like we're still eyeballing the market space. We even have AI in our name for that matter. It's been there for a long time. People ask us continuously, like, what does artificial intelligence in the world of Alloy actually mean? And a lot of it, we always caveat that with like, yeah, people talk about AI and stuff, but when you really like look in what they're doing with it, it tends to be not a ton. And we're only first seeing like the very first fruits of the probably the more interesting ways that AI will probably change things.
Well, thanks for that conversation, Ryan. That was awesome. And for our listeners, they can go over to alloy.ai to check out your company.
Yeah, thanks for having the
Thanks, Ryan.
conversation.
Go Bearcats.
Well, I think that was a really cool interview with Ryan. And as you know, too, I've known Ryan for a really long time. We worked together at Smart Design, and he's a fantastic, practitioner of UX research and UX design. So that was really cool to talk about kind of how he was taking this complex data and being able to make it understandable. He's done that in a lot of his positions, and because I think that there's a lot of data. There's a lot of like ways that it could be interpreted, but it's interesting kind of like how they're using AI, but then also how they're using that to then enable, simplicity and understanding because there's just a lot going on.
There's obviously lots of opportunity around like BI tools, like kind of visualization of data,
Mm-hmm.
where it doesn't necessarily have to be charts and graphs.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are helpful, quick visuals. But then I think you mentioned at the top of the episode, you want to talk with the data, see what's happening behind the scenes, what can I do with it, all types of things, which I know he's excited about and interested in exploring those things. So
Yeah.
curious to see how they evolve in kind of the age of AI.
Yeah, me too. And it was cool too to have a conversation around supply chain. We haven't really spoken to anybody in that space yet, so that was really cool.
Yeah, because a lot of the brands that are on our platform are primarily using it in the front of the front and the creation process. So how you can embed consumers through that whole journey to create something new and go there a lot faster, and create kind of fewer better things, and then see how that might kind of kick in to their platform to then measure how successful sell-through is across all the big box retailers.
Yeah. And all the people that are involved throughout the whole process too, because there's people that are kind of stocking things. There's people that are kind of moving these products into different places too. So incorporating their input be fantastic and kind of really help streamline. That's going to do it for this episode of AI Powered by People. The show is produced by Steve Berkowitz and brought to you by Verve. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Tuesday.